another episode of the Gold Country Media Sports Jam. I'm Jordan.
I'm Aaron.
And I'm Matt.
So we got a few different locations than normal today. Matt, I see you're from the Telegraph office. Aaron, what about you? Where are you coming to us from?
I am here from the Messenger office. I've got all the archive stuff behind me. I found a pretty good location. Hopefully I'm more shaded. The lighting's better. So I'm bringing it to you today from the office. And it looks better on my end at least.
All right. I'm coming to you from my living room. I actually have a funny story with that. I was planning to be in the office today. But for those, I just kind of told Matt this story. But for those who don't know, yesterday I got engaged. So yes, happy times. However, it was the most eventful day of my life for another reason. Friday night, I twisted my ankle a little bit at the football game. Didn't think anything of it. I was walking around just fine. Saturday, I was a little sore, but again, walking around just fine. I wake up yesterday morning, the morning I'm proposing, and I can't put any weight on my left foot. And I was like, okay, I need to figure this out. I take some Tylenol, I hobble through getting ready because I'm proposing today up at Apple Hill. Like I need to be able to use my foot. And, I'm, hobbling through Apple Hill, barely making it through, like just limping. I get her proposal. She says yes. So, thankfully we didn't have to have that awkward ride home if she said no. And I take my shoe off in the car and my foot is just swollen, completely swollen. I can't put any weight on it at this point. And I ended up in urgent care last night. And got some x-rays on my foot. Didn't break it, but I severely sprained my ankle. So I am in a walking boot right now. I plan to be back in the office tomorrow, but I had to take the day off because even this morning when I got up, I couldn't put any weight on my foot, even with the walking boot. I had to use crutches. I'm able to start walking with the boot a little bit now, but I was like, I can't make it into the office and make it up the stairs in Auburn if I'm in a walking boot with crutches. So I ended up having to work from home. So that's my eventful Sunday that I had yesterday.
I'm sorry to hear that. I'm glad it's not worse than it is. What'd you do at the football game that caused that to happen?
So literally, I mean, you guys everyone's had this. You guys just have taken like a step and it was like kind of an awkward step and you rolled your ankle a little bit, right? That's all I did, and I didn't think anything of it. And even in the moment, I felt fine, but something must have happened outside of that agitated it, and it just took a day or two to show up.
I'm sorry to hear that. I've nearly fallen on head over heels before in a cross-country race, and I didn't get screwed up that bad. So I'm feel for you, man. I'm sorry.
I'm going to say this. I feel old. Like I did not think I would have a slightly rolled ankle and end up in me in a walking boot, not able to put weight on a foot. But hey, here we are. So anyway, though, back to the football games. I know we had some pretty eventful ones. Matt, let's start with you. You were at a big SFL matchup between Oak Ridge and Granite Bay. What'd you see from that football game on Friday night?
Yeah, well, these teams have a history of playing close games. Like 3 of the last 4 meetings before Friday were 1-point games. So I figured this would be a close one. It was another 1-point game. It came down to a two-point conversion. Granite Bay had a touchdown in the final 80 seconds of the game. And Granite Bay decided to go for 2. And before, McCade Long took the snap and it took 2 steps, Oak Ridge's nose guard, Marcus Hoffman, threw the line, had his leg, and stopped the play before he even got a chance to start. So that wrapped it up for Oak Ridge. So it was a nice win for the Trojans and, tough for Granite Bay. And I talked to Joe Catalico after the game, Granite Bay head coach, and he went for 2, he said, because, he felt, the way overtime is played, it favors the bigger, stronger team. And he just didn't think his team could beat Oak Ridge in overtime because they're the smaller team. And Oak Ridge was, dominating the line of scrimmage most of the night. So he had a chance to win it there and he went for it. So he didn't go back on that decision or anything. He was fine with it. So, really good game, close game. And, Hoffman dominated. I talked to Hoffman after the game and, kids will be kids, but he said I dominated the center all night long, and they brought in a backup, and so he was feeling good about himself. And Granite Bay quarterback McCade Long did bobble the snap at least a half a dozen times, and Hoffman took credit for that because I was pushing the center back. So Oak Ridge really won the battle at the line of scrimmage in that game. Especially on defense, because when I saw Granite Bay early in the year against Vista Del Lago, that's the game that Carter Jackson had yards rushing or whatever. Granite Bay doesn't have stats up yet, but I had him down for 10 carries for 20 yards against Oak Ridge. So they really stopped Granite Bay's run game. And fortunately for Granite Bay, they were able to pass the ball a little bit. Carson Perry Smith had a great game. And again, these aren't official numbers, but I had him for 6 catches for 224 yards and 2 touchdowns for the Grizzlies. So he was their star player. But anyway, Oak Ridge's offense, Jake Hall had a nice game for them. He had a touchdown and a touchdown run and rush for over 100 yards. And another touchdown pass from Maddox Varela to Kai Reisinger. And then Carson Nichols kicked another 41-yard field goal. So that was their points. And both touchdowns for Granite Bay were from Carson Perry Smith. So, competitive game, good game. And, the Grizzlies fell to 0-2. Oak Ridge is at 1-1. And my other 2 schools, Vista beat Del Campo 35-14. The news out of that is Johnny Kedden, he played, in the first quarter, he got hit hard, and Coach Landis took him out of the game as a precaution. And fellow junior Will Anderson came in and finished the game, and they won 35-14, so he played well. And then Folsom beat Whitney 55-7, just domination. There's not too much to say about that one.
Yeah, and kind of on that the Granite Bay Oak Ridge game, 2 takeaways. I think everyone going into that week around the whole region looked at that going, one of these teams is going to be 0-2 in SFL play. How is that going to happen? I mean, it just feels weird, but that's how the schedule lined up. But from a pure football standpoint, doesn't it almost feel a little anticlimactic when a team goes for 2 at the end of a game or something like that, and then a play just gets blown up before it even develops? You're like, I waited for that.
Yeah, I
like,
mean,
wow, that ended quick.
I don't know. Maybe it's just I just tend to think the offense has the advantage there, and I always think whether it's my team I'm covering or the opposing, I kind of think, they're going to score. I mean, you're 3 yards away. I mean, how hard is it? But
Right.
This Oak Ridge surprised me. So.
Right. That's a huge win for them, especially with how tough the SFL is, and I think with Rockland still being very good, with Del Oro being, I think, better than some of us expected. I mean, no win is going to come easy in that league. So that's a huge win for Oak Ridge. And now Granite Bay's stuck in a hole. I think they're going to be fine, but they're kind of stuck in this 0-2 hole in that league right now.
Well, Oak Ridge is coming off that loss at Folsom, so I really feel they needed this win. Whether it's a close or a blowout, whatever, they needed a win, and they got it. So good for them.
Definitely. And Aaron, kind of moving over to you, you were at a pretty big rivalry game with some of the small schools. Talk to me about what you saw.
Yeah, so I was over at I was announcing the game over at Lincoln for Lincoln versus Placer, and like I said last week, that's one of the best rivalries in the whole area. And it was really a tale of 2 halves. The Zebras started strong. Gianni Faria recovered a fumble on about the 3rd play, I want to say, near the red zone, and Lincoln capitalized as Ryan Henning took it in for a 1-yard touchdown run. Placer answered right back though. Baylor Kelly got going. He took it in for a 9-yard score following 3 completions from Placer's quarterback Joshua Craycraft. The Hillman took the lead with a Costa Alexis 1-yard score, making it 14-7. Zebras were able to put together a 12-play, 80-yard drive with 2:45 remaining in the first half, ending with a 1-yard QB sneak touchdown from Mukai. So it was a 14-14 game and a half. And I was thinking, okay, we got a ball game here. I might be pleasantly surprised, but Lincoln did a really good job stopping Jaden Suggs in the first half, even though Alexich and Kelly really got going. But the second half was a completely different story. Placer really got the 3-headed monster going of Kelly, Alexich, and Jaden Suggs. First drive of the game of the second half, 5 plays, 80 yards, all rushing plays. Alexich takes it in for 17 yards out to take the lead. They weren't able to get anything going on their next offensive drive. And then when Placer got back up, it looked like Lincoln was going to be able to get a big play because Michael Dallas, one of their best defensive players, forced a fumble. But Placer recovered it, and they made Lincoln pay. Once again, Alexich would score a touchdown. And then, Zebras just got nothing going offensively in the second half, and Suggs basically put the nail in the coffin in the fourth quarter with a 26-yard score. So Placer spoiled Lincoln's homecoming, shut them out in the second half. I talked with Coach Montoya after the game, and he didn't really feel it was a tale of 2 halves. He didn't feel that they struggled in the first half. They just kind of beat themselves with the fumble and then gave up the touchdown right before halftime. This Hillman team, they look so dominant. They look so calm, cool, and collected. And I definitely think they're a team that has 10-0 written all over them. Of course, that West Park game is going to be really interesting in the penultimate game of the season. That Hillman team looks extremely difficult, especially on the ground.
Yeah, and they got a little bit of help too in that Division III field with Van Den losing. Now Placer, a lot of projections have them as a 1 seed in that bracket. And I mean, Auburn's a tough place to come. Placer's a tough team to play in general. And then you have to go beat them in Auburn. I mean, it's going to be a tall order for a few teams out there. So Placer is probably going to be calling up Vacaville, maybe sending him a thank you package this morning for potentially helping him out with that.
And ironically, you mentioned Placer is the number 1 seed in D3. Well, West Park's the number 1 seed projected right now in D4. So that's what, again, makes that matchup really intriguing in a few weeks. Lincoln's probably going to be in D4, but they still need to win another game or two, and I'll get into them a little bit more in a bit. But Placer, West Park, man, that's going to be one heck of a matchup.
I agree, and we'll kind of dive into some playoff seeding talk now that we're getting there soon. But first, I want to talk about where I was. So Thursday, I was at Colfax and Wheatland. It was Colfax's senior night. Colfax ended up winning the game 10-6. The game was a lot closer than it should have been. Colfax left at least 10 points off the board with a missed field goal and a fumbled ball at the goal line, but that would have made it 17-0 at the half. If those mistakes don't happen. And honestly, I mean, 7-0 at the half versus 17-0 at the half, that's a very different feeling. And I think that's a thing that could have opened up the floodgates with them. Wheatland has a pretty solid defense, but the Falcon defense was unbelievable. I mean, Wheatland crossed midfield once in this game, and it was on its only scoring drive of the game. But Colfax ended up holding them to only 157 total yards, and I think 70 or 80 of them were on that one scoring drive. So the Falcons just shut them down in this game, forced 3 turnovers, and Wheatland's first 2 possessions of the game were lost fumbles. They ended up having a big interception late in the game too. They ended up sealing it, but I mean, just a huge move by Colfax. Great game by them. The one thing with Colfax, it did pick up its 4th win of the year. It's had some struggles, but several starters have been out on this team, including probably 2 of their top 3 players. But all of them are hopefully going to be back in the next week or 2 after this. They've got a bye week this week. And I mean, we've seen what they were doing at the beginning of the year and how scary that team can be when they're healthy. So if these guys come back healthy and this team looks ready to go, I think Colfax is going to be a scary team. But Friday, we had some SFL action. We had Del Oro and Rockland playing in the battle for the Shield. For those that don't know, that game is played in honor of fallen Rockland police officer Matt Redding. He is a Rockland PD officer, or was a Rockland PD officer that was struck and killed by a drunk driver, but he was a Del Oro alum. And actually, Del Oro head coach Mike Mabin went to school with Redding at Del Oro. But Del Oro dominated the first half of this one. They were up 20-0 at the break. It looked like it was going to be a different game. Rockland, the first drive, Del Oro first drive, they get inside the 20, and then penalties back them up. And I think they ended up doing like a 4th and 45, which there's not much in the playbook for. But then Rockland gets inside the red zone. And it's like, okay, hold on. Rockland's kind of punching Dio in the mouth right here. And Del Oro ends up getting a huge stop. Like 2 plays later, Caden Pinnick finds Aaron Unfried for an 89-yard touchdown. And that kind of just opened things up. Then Tommy Poe ended up reeling in a big touchdown reception. I think that one was 41 yards. And then 2-minute drill right before the half, Del Oro's up 14-0. They get backed up on like a 4th and 20. And Caden Pinnick is actually the punter for Del Oro too. And he gets a snap, and all of a sudden he runs for it, and he runs for a first down. Then 2 plays later, he finds Jagger French wide open for a 19-yard touchdown to make it 20-0 right before the half. And Rockland looked just deflated coming off the field. And I honestly thought after that touchdown, I'm like, this game's over already. I mean, that was just the nail in the coffin. But Rockland all of a sudden comes out with a scary rushing attack in the second half. Mason Silva ran for, I think, 193 of his 203 yards in the second half. The first drive out of the half, it was 9 plays, all runs. Silva had 63 of those yards. And Rockland comes in, scores, they get a stop, they score again. All of a sudden, it's 20-13. But then Del Oro kind of backed into a 3rd down situation, looking like they're going to be punting the ball away. Caden Pinnick finds Tommy Poe on 3rd down, down at the 1-yard line for a huge gain. Then Pinnick punches in a few plays later. Then Rockland gets the ball back and throws a pick 2 plays later to Robert Garcia. He returns it inside the 20, and then Kaya runs it in, making it 33-13. Silva did add another touchdown on like a 62-yard run to make it 33-20. But I mean, the score looks a little closer than the majority of that game was. Rockland made a late push, but Del Oro really controlled that game. And now it makes it interesting. Dio is 7-0 heading into the Folsom game. Rockland falls to 5-2. Still think Folsom has the upper hand. I had a few Dio people ask me, hey, is there any shot Del Oro beats Folsom? So if they hold Folsom to under 28, I think you can get a ball game, but holding that team to under 28 is a very, very, very tall order. But it does bring up the interesting question of Manteca is in Division 2, and all signs are pointing to Manteca finishing 10-0. But if you get an 8-2 or 9-1 Del Oro up against a 10-0 Manteca, who do you give the 1 seed to in Division 2? Because 10-0 is 10-0, but you got to kind of ask the question, or Manteca, I believe, can only be 9-0 because they had a game canceled. But you kind of have to ask the question of, would Manteca be 8-2 or 9-1 with Del Oro's schedule? And that's, that's where it gets into a tough spot. And I think it's going to be interesting to see what happens with that. But anyway, kind of moving on, we obviously learned a lot from some of our teams, and especially now that we've seen some more SFL games, we've learned some things. But Matt, what are some things that stood out to you of things that you learned?
Well, I was at the Oak Ridge Granite Bay game, and Oak Ridge was without their top wide receiver, Sebastian Sutton, and that he had broken his hand a few weeks ago, but he played against Folsom, and actually, his hand was in a cast and wrapped up like into a big ball, and he still caught 4 passes. So it was an amazing performance, but he got hurt in that game and did return, and he didn't play against Granite Bay. I don't know how long he's out, but I do know the Trojans need him because their offense just, I don't know, maybe it was a bad night. Maybe Granite Bay just played really good defense, but they ran the ball half decent, but Maddox Varela didn't have much of a passing attack. And Sutton's their deep threat. So without him, it was a bunch of smaller stuff, and just the offense wasn't clicking like it had been. So what I learned is, right now, Oak Ridge has Jake Hall running the ball very well. They got a very good field goal kicker, but they need to get that passing game going.
All right, I like it. And with Sutton playing with that injured hand, we could really say that me doing the sports jam from a walking boot, him playing with an injured hand, we're both really Iron Men. And you there, Sutton. Aaron, what about you? What'd you learn Friday night?
So, one thing coming out of Friday night is, Lincoln now is 3-4. They're fighting for a playoff spot at this point. I think it's fair to say that, West Park can still beat Placer and Lincoln can still beat West Park, and they can still all be tied for that league. I think Lincoln right now needs to focus on just winning games and getting that 4th and potentially 5th win so that they can ensure themselves into the section playoffs. So they, in my opinion, need to win 2 of their last 3 against Oakmont, Ponderosa, and West Park. I do think they should get Oakmont and Ponderosa. They play Oakmont this week, who actually beat Ponderosa on Friday night, but I'm not sure if they get West Park at the end of the season. Some other things I learned with some other of my teams, Wood Creek sneaked by Yuba City 17-14. If they can take down Antelope this week, then the CVC race will get exponentially more interesting, especially after Roseville beat Bella Vista. Speaking of Roseville, this is a team that can put up points in an instant. They scored 43 in the second quarter alone against Bella Vista. They continue to be a threat offensively. They also got a defensive touchdown in the second quarter, so the Tigers continue to be playing strong. Valley Christian lost to Encina Prep 33-30. Because of that loss, they will now likely need to beat either Woodland Christian or Delta if they're to sneak into the playoffs, and that's not going to be an easy task for them. Also, in volleyball, the SFL is likely going to be decided this Thursday when Whitney faces Oak Ridge at home. Oak Ridge got Whitney in 5 last time, so that should be one heck of a matchup.
All right, I like it. And, Valley Christian, they're in a tough spot. They're pretty much where Forest Hill was last year, and I'll kind of touch on that in a minute. But a couple of things I learned is, one, Caden Pinnick is a star growing before our eyes. He gets better every single time he touches the ball. Last week for Del Oro, he threw 257 yards. He had 3 touchdown passes. He ran for another 37 yards and a touchdown. He runs that Del Oro team with a lot of confidence. They're ready to take on the world. But, one thing I like about Pinnick is just how calm, cool, and collected he is. He was 13 for 17 last week, and I'm pretty sure 2 or 3 of the incompletions were drop passes. So, he's very efficient. He runs that team with confidence. He's cool under pressure. He's a great player. Another thing I learned, especially after seeing, what Del Oro did against Granite Bay and then seeing Oak Ridge's kind of score, and now that we've seen some mutual opponents, I still think I'm going to pick Oak Ridge when that matchup comes because it's in El Dorado Hills, but I think Del Oro and Oak Ridge are a lot more evenly matched than I initially had thought. And I think that could be a game that's really played for second in league. And I think it's a game Del Oro has a chance at winning. Another one, I mean, Placer, just with what they did and how they buckled down and ended up shutting out Lincoln in the second half. I mean, that's a scary team. And I think you are probably looking at the top seed in Division 3 with that. Then the other one is Forest Hill picking up its first win, 39-0 over Western Sierra. They're kind of in a tough spot too. So they had the 4-win requirement waived with everything going on with the mosquito fire, but they're now sitting at 1-4. And you got to think 2 wins is not going to be enough to get you in, because that would leave you at 2-6. It's probably going to have to be 3-5 to get them in the playoffs. They played a tough schedule, so the odds are kind of in their favor on that. But I mean, you essentially are going to have to pull 2 out of 3 wins from Encina, Woodland Christian, and Delta, and that's not going to be an easy task. But I do think Forest Hill is a better team than that 1-4 record shows. They just had a very tough schedule to start, and kind of hitting on some of the big players. I know I hinted with Caden Pinnock, had a big one. Like I said, 3 passing touchdowns over 250 yards and a rushing touchdown. Another big Del Oro player was Brandon Hill. He had 2 sacks in that game. He was everywhere on the defensive end. I mean, it felt like his name was always getting called out. Tommy Poe had a few big receptions. I believe he had 3 receptions, 89 yards, something like that, and a touchdown. So he was big for the Golden Eagles. But then Costa Alexic, 180 rushing yards and 3 touchdowns for Placer. That's a big one, and a huge rivalry win for them. Austin Leiden had a touchdown and a fumble recovery for Colfax. And a special shout out to Colfax Girls Golf, who won its last 2 matches. There's a big one coming up against Bear River this week. Those 2 split the PVL title last year. So shout out to them. Matt, kind of throwing it over to you. What were some big performances that you saw from this last weekend?
Yeah, Jake Hall, Oak Ridge fullback, running back, 14 carries, 117 yards, 1 touchdown. Marcus Hoffman, 6 tackles, 1.5 sacks, and stopped the 2-point conversion by himself, basically, to win the game for the Trojans. Folsom was kind of evenly spread through everybody in their win against Whitney. Camden King, junior safety for Vista del Lago, had his 4th interception of the season and third in his last 3 games. So he's coming on strong for the Eagles.
All right. I like it. And Aaron, kind of throwing it over to you. I know you had a lot of big games kind of going on. What were some big performances you saw?
Yeah, so starting off with the game you were at, you mentioned Mason Silva, 9 carries, 203 yards, and 2 touchdowns. He continues to shine, even though the Thunder, weren't able to pull out the win there. Lincoln, even though they lost 35-14, Sean Cotton has been all over the field all year, especially on defense. He had 11 tackles on Friday night, and is second on the team in tackles behind Peyton Raper. Roseville senior Caden Belton had 8 carries for 60 yards and 2 touchdowns in the 64-36 win. Nick Macaluso, also, as I mentioned, the defensive touchdown. He had a 44-yard fumble return touchdown. That was the one. West Park, DeVell Barksdale, I've mentioned his name a few times this year, and he's finally going to be my South Placer Athlete of the Week. 13 for 23 for 209 yards and 4 touchdowns, including 1 rushing touchdown, and ran for 55 yards. Whitney Volleyball junior Evelyn Hendricks had 12 kills and 4 blocks in a 3-set win against Del Oro on Thursday. Wood Creek Volleyball sophomore Taylor Rice totaled 12 kills, 4 aces, and 24 digs in a 3-set win over Bella Vista on Thursday. So great on the offensive and defensive front. And then Granite Bay's cross country, their sophomore Jacqueline Oyad, I believe I'm pronouncing that right, placed 7th out of 164 runners in the Frostoff race at the A6 Clovis Invitational at Woodward Park. The team placed 4th out of 21. Woodward Park is where the state championships are held in Fresno. So some impressive performances across a few sports.
Hey, Jordan.
Yeah.
Hey, I forgot to mention somebody. Vista fullback Thomas Keegan. I don't think I mentioned him. 63 yards rushing, but 4 touchdowns. So I want to throw him in there.
Yeah, that's impressive. That's the most efficient you can be as a fullback. I like that. That's like some Jerome Bettis stat line right there.
Well, he's built like a fullback. I guess technically he's a running back, but yeah, he's
like
a good short yardage runner.
I like it. Matt, I actually forgot to mention a shout out too for an impressive thing I saw, and it actually wasn't someone playing in any game on Friday night, but Rockland has done a lot to support Logan Webb, their alum, the San Francisco Giants pitcher. It was really cool to see Logan was actually at the Rockland DO game Friday night, and it was cool. I got to catch up with him for those viewers that don't know, I actually played T-ball with Logan and Little League with him. And, I've known him for a long time, but it was nice catching up with him. It was cool seeing, him come back and support Rockland when that community has helped support him so much on his journey to the pros. But kind of moving on to this Friday, we've got another huge slate of games. And Matt, I think you have the biggest game in the area. So why don't we kick it off with you? Where are you going to be Friday night?
Yeah, I'll be at Folsom for their homecoming game against Del Oro. So that's the only two undefeated league teams in the SFL. So that should be a good one. Coach Doherty, Folsom coach, he's like you were saying earlier about Pinnock. He said he's the real deal, and he said anytime you have a good quarterback, you get a chance. So he's concerned about containing him. Del Oro, Folsom, they finished third in the league last year. They want to get that league championship back. Del Oro undefeated. They certainly they want a league championship, but I don't think Del Oro. Since Folsom's joined this league, Del Oro has never been closer to beating Folsom than 31 points. So I think they're also playing for some respect this week. The closest game was 31-0. So they would love nothing more than to beat Folsom. It's going to be a tall task. I think if Folsom turns the ball over 3 or 4 times, it could happen, but I don't think they will. And I think Folsom's going to win, but I think it's going to be a intense game.
I do too. And, I still think Folsom, I've said this for a long time, Folsom is Folsom till it's not. But, just because Folsom has the stranglehold that it has on that league doesn't mean the rest of the teams in that league aren't good. We've seen multiple times the SFL send 2, or I think there's been a time where it's even maybe sent 3 teams to a state championship in the same season. So it's not like it's something out of the ordinary to see Folsom, just run through that league and still see a team from the SFL come out and make a deep run into playoffs. But Aaron, kind of throwing it over to you. I know you got some big games in your area this weekend. You're hitting 2 of them this week, I believe. Tell me about where you're going to be.
Yeah, that is correct. Yes, Antelope Wood Creek got moved to Thursday, so I'm going to be going there on Thursday night. As I mentioned earlier, if Wood Creek is able to take down the Titans, it will be I believe 3-way tie. Make that 4-way tie in the CVC between Wood Creek, Antelope, Inderkum, and Roseville. They'll all have 1 loss, so it's going to be a big game on Thursday. Antelope's coming off of a bye, and their last game was a 34-26 win over Yuba City. That was a 6-point margin of victory. And, Wood Creek just played Yuba City, and that was a 3-point margin of victory. Now, of course, the games can be a bit different, but that gives you an idea of what this one can kind of be matched up to look like. I think the question for Wood Creek is, can they stop Karan Borders, but can they also limit Josiah Bateman's passing game for Antelope? Borders only totaled 106 yards of total offense against Yuba City, but Bateman had 4 touchdowns. Wood Creek will also need to run the ball well, as they have in their other games, such as against Lincoln. I think this should be a close game, but I'm going to give the edge to Antelope. I'm going to go 27-21. On Friday, I'll be at another big game. This one is for small schools between 12 Bridges home against Sutter. Both teams are the only undefeated squads left in the PVL. We've talked about this game a little bit last week when we had Chris Bean on. And if you're listening, Chris, thank you for coming on last week again. 12 Bridges is not expecting to win this game, when you factor in Sutter's physicality, but at the same time, Sutter only beat Center by 3 at home in overtime. I think this one's going to be a lot closer than many expect, but there's also so many variables for 12 Bridges to look for, such as Joseph Martinez on defense, who totaled 16 tackles and a sack against Center. And then offensively, Sutter has Troy Brucey and Luke Miller, who've totaled 15 touchdowns this season. On the flip side, though, 12 Bridges has performed well themselves with Nathan Crawford, who I believe has 750 yards on the season. They also now have Isaiah Rodriguez in the lineup, who performed well in the game against Center. I'm going to go with Sutter in this one, but I'm going to say 30-24. I think that'll be a lot closer than people expect.
All right, I like it. And for me, I'm only hitting 1 this week. It's going to be a Foothill Valley League matchup. Rivals Nevada Union and Placer square off. This is a game where probably two of the older schools in the foothills, a lot of history between these 2 schools, and a lot of championships between these 2 schools. And you've kind of fallen on some harder times in recent years, but it's going to be interesting for this one because Placer is really making that final push for a league title and the top seed in Division III. And this is one of those games where I could see this being a trap game for Placer, and Nevada Union does have some weapons that they can make it a little bit scary for Placer. They can make them sweat a little bit. I still think, knowing Coach Joey Montoya, knowing, how he has those guys prepared, how hard they practice every week, I still think Placer's going to come in with this one and not have too much trouble. They've got just a deadly rushing attack, a shutdown defense. I think the Hillmen win this one. And I think it's going to set up a battle of unbeatens next week in Roseville between Placer and West Park. I'm going to say Placer is going to win this one 49-6 over NU. So hopefully a big one for Placer there. And like I said, fingers crossed we get an undefeated battle between Placer and West Park for the winner of that league. And honestly, probably who's going to be the top seed in Division III with that game. So hopefully we get a good one for that. And, just another little shout out of something I'll be covering this week on Thursday, actually, going into some college stuff. William Jessup had one of the best traditions in college basketball is Midnight Madness, where, the players get to showcase some of their stuff to fans a couple weeks before the season starts. Well, Jessup has it. It's not Midnight Madness. It's Warrior Madness over there. Jessup's basketball program, a great program. They made it to the Elite Eight last year in NAIA. They have a couple players that are on the NAIA preseason All-American watch list, a couple on the NAIA preseason Player of the Year watch list even. And that's a team that I believe they're ranked 13th to open up the season. I got to check, but that might be the highest ranking they've ever had to open up a season. A team that brings back a lot of talent. I'll be checking that out on Thursday night late. I believe it starts at 8:30 or 9 o'clock. But, giving that a little look and seeing what college basketball in the area is going to look like. So shout out to them. That's another thing that I will be at this week. But I think that just about does it for this week's episode of the Sports Jam. Does anyone have anything we want to add before we get going?
Yeah, I do.
All right.
Aaron mentioned earlier about the Clovis invite. All three of my schools were there. Oak Ridge girls finished 5th in the championship race. Dynamite performance for them. Folsom boys were 8th in the extra large school race, and the Vista girls were 9th in the medium school race. Last Thursday, Folsom volleyball, a big 5-set win over Rockland after losing to them in 3 before. So it's a great win for the Bulldogs, and that just makes the SFL even tighter in the standings. And then this Wednesday, Vista has a home match against Rio, who they lost to earlier. So that's a big match for the Eagles. So just wanted to throw those things out there.
All right, I like it. Honestly, for how impressive we talk about, how good the SFL is in football, it's equally as impressive, deep, and if not better for girls volleyball. I mean, if you look at almost anyone that puts out rankings, it seems like everyone in the SFL is in the top 10 for both leagues.
I would say it's definitely at least equal to football. Yeah.
It's impressive. So shout out to SFL girls volleyball, because that is a deep league and another league where you probably have 3-4 teams that can make state championship runs in it. So shout out to you guys, and shout out to the cross country in this area, because I think all of us have strong programs that we cover. I mean, Colfax and Placer I know are always doing well. I know your South Placer area, you've got a few big cross country programs out there, and Matt, it seems like every week someone from one of your schools is impressing too. So shout out to you guys too, because that is not sport. As someone who clearly does not run because I sprained my ankle walking at football games, I mean, shout out to you guys. You are impressive in what you guys do.
Yeah, and speaking of cross country, Whitney's varsity boys continue to excel and thrive. They were first at the Tom Lathe a couple weeks back, and Katie Kopek, senior over there, she actually just committed a few days ago to Oregon State University, and I'll be doing something on that this week. So congratulations to her, and Whitney's got a very strong cross country program.
All right, I like it. Shout out to you. And I think that's going to just about do it for this week's episode of the Gold Country Media Sports Jam. I've been Jordan.
I've been Aaron.
I'm Matt Long.
All right. Thank you guys for tuning in. I appreciate it. We'll see you next week.